of new parking standard was presented to Planning Committee. We asked members to approve a consultation exercise. Committee approved that, and in the summer and autumn of 2019, an extensive public consultation exercise was undertaken, followed by an analysis of the consultation responses and a consequent redrafting of the document. In May of last year, a second draft of the standards document was presented to the Planning Committee, and members may recall there were a number of concerns that took us to a position where officers were asked to go away and do some further work on a number of issues. That work has gone on through the summer and autumn of last year, bringing us to the position where we are now, representing a further revised standards document for Planning Committee to consider. In respect to the concerns raised at committee last May, there were three issues. The first issue being the standards relating to houses of multiple occupancy, and that was principally within Sector 1. The second issue was the application of standards relating to non-residential development within Sector 1. And the third issue was the extent of the boundary of Sector 1. In all other regards, the draft presented to members in March, I think, was largely acceptable. As all of these issues relate to Sector 1, then just a little reminder of the fact that Sector 1 is the central area comprising the town centre and the old town, and that is the sector of the borough within which more relaxed parking standards are proposed to be applied. So dealing with the first issue being the standards relating to houses of multiple occupation, members may recall that in May 2020, the text below was presented, effectively saying that car parking standards for houses of multiple occupation were on a tiered basis depending on the level of occupation, i.e. the number of people the dwelling was licensed for. Most critically, and the text below taken from that draft, at the time we were saying that HMOs within Sector 1 would be basically would have no standard applied. There would be a relaxation such that no car parking would be demanded for HMOs in the central area. And that was an issue that I think members were uncomfortable with, and that's why we've undertaken the review since then. The amended proposals, as contained within the draft at Appendix 2 of the document presented now to committee, in respect of HMOs within Sector 1, we are now proposing some car parking. There will be minimum standards. Those standards are different to the standards for other parts of the borough and reflect the increased accessibility within Sector 1. But you'll also see from the table below, which is lifted effectively out of the draft document presented to you at Appendix 2, for Sectors 2, 3 and 4, we are proposing a slightly less confusing standard than contained in the last draft. It's worth emphasising that in terms of cycle parking, we will, for both Sector 1 and other sectors, we're proposing that one cycle parking space is included per habitable room. I want to talk a little bit about the reasons why we moved to the position we have. And to some degree, this answers the question of Mr. Williams. You know, we've always said that the parking standards are not technical issues. There is no hard and fast answer for what any parking standard should be. What we try and do is balance policy set out in the local plan and the NPPF with common sense to some degree and general aspirations of the council to support certain types of development in certain locations. In terms of trying to evidence the standards for HMOs, you know, we've looked to benchmark our standards against other authorities. We've also tried to find information about demographics and car ownership levels and income levels within HMOs, but that information is very, very limited. So what we are proposing at the moment is a a move away from what we were proposing before, but I think it comes closer to the aspirations of members. It does accord with the NPPA. There is nothing within the policy guidance that suggests we can't apply standards to HMOs, even in the central area. And the result of the benchmarking exercise showed us that most other authorities have defined standards for HMOs, and those standards do not make provision for relaxation where accessibility levels are high. There is a new associated issue that's really come to my attention in the last couple of weeks, and that is how we treat extensions to HMOs. Now, this isn't dealt with in the document that's presented to members here, but I am proposing, on the basis of some work done recently, that we extend the standards to include the treatment of extensions to HMOs. We do have a lot of applications for extensions to HMOs through reconfiguration, through extension of buildings, that the number of licensed occupants increases. And as currently drafted, the standards don't deal with that. So what we're proposing here, you'll see in the table below, if members agree to it, that would be incorporated into the adopted standards document. Now, what we're saying within Sector 1, where an extension is proposed that gives effectively one further occupant, we won't be seeking any change to parking levels. But where two or more occupants are added effectively to an existing HMO within Sector 1, we would be looking for an additional car parking space over anything that's there at the moment. And where it's greater than 7, we'd be looking for 2 spaces. In respect of other sectors, we're looking at the ratio you can see there of half a space per new occupant, and that would be rounded up. Again, going back to the issue about why we are proposing these changes, it is effectively it's the best balance we can find between and the interpretation of parking guidance within the policy documentation. And dealing specifically with Mr. Williams' question, we feel it is entirely right and proper that different standards are applied to HMOs and normal dwelling houses, simply because of the different nature of occupants and the different demographics. And we feel it is appropriate, if members are so minded, to apply a standard to HMOs in the central area, because provision is made for that within the planning policy guidance, and all benchmarking suggests that is what other authorities are doing, and it is therefore entirely reasonable. In terms of the second issue that came out of Planning Committee in last May, that related to the parking standards for non-residential development in Sector 1. Now, members may recall that at that time we were proposing that 14 non-residential land uses had a parking standard applied to them. For all other non-residential standards, we're proposing that a site-specific assessment of need is undertaken, and developers make a case for what they believe